in Lisbon. I lived here for 2 years in my youth. It was great teaching English. So I'm going to be talking to you about engaging with tomorrow's customer. And just a tiny little bit of intro on us. GDR Creative Intelligence, we're a London and New York-based retail and hospitality trends and strategy consultancy. So we work with all of those companies you see at the bottom there, retained by all of those, and work with lots of others as well, worldwide. So we are doing our research continuously on a global scale and distilling the trends that we see into hopefully usable insights. So I'm going to talk about what we have here, which is that we have a problem, and the problem is that the vacation itself is a 20th century construct. We have a changing economy, we have totally new technologies, as you know, and they are changing the context in which we live, and that poses both challenges and opportunities. And so that's the problem. The solution, a little bit more difficult to define, but essentially it's strategies which address this tension between contradictory customer needs. And I'm going to come to those contradictory needs a bit later. It's not easy providing services in the modern world, as you'll know. Retail and hospitality, both very complex areas these days. So just to give you a little bit of a kind of background, I want to talk about this 20th century construct idea. This is a book that's come out recently from the University of Southern California, a writer there who says, vacations were born in the Industrial Revolution when the pressure of industry, time discipline, working by the clock meant that we started for the first time separating work from life. So pre-industrialization, of course, we all worked where we lived and it was all mixed up. It was only when we all went into factories in the 18th century and 19th century that we had that distinction, which led, of course, to the fabulous two-week holiday that we've known and loved for many years. However, as you know, our work and life are very much more, or our work lives are very much more precarious these days. And here are just a few stats from around the world. In Spain, 18 million temporary contracts were generated in 2016, only 1.7 million long-term jobs. So those who perhaps optimistically thought that part-time work would move into full-time work are wrong, it seems, from the stats. We know that only 20% of temp workers in Europe have transitioned to full-time work since 2012. We have the scare stories across the world now, up to 66% of current jobs potentially going to be automated by machine learning, artificial intelligence, robotics, etc. You know the general stories. And by 2021, the number of on-demand jobs in the US is expected to surpass the number of current jobs in finance. So, you know, this is never going to go away. This is only going to become more extreme. So I think an important aspect of the background here is to look at the fragmentation of the middle classes in the West. So this is very different in China, but in the West, and this is UK, but America is exactly the same, we have 62% in 1980 were middle-income householders, what we call the middle classes, what you call middle income if you're from the US. So that was 62%. The vast majority of every population in the Western world was middle class, and so you were pretty clever if you were a service provider, if you were aiming at that middle. But the 62% in 1980 has now shrunk, and we have more recent figures for other parts of the world, but for the UK, only 2010, 60-odd% has gone to 48%. So the middle class is shrinking, the wealthy class is growing, and also the lower income classes are growing. Now, this is also a rather concerning issue, the fact that we're seeing job polarization. This is across all countries in Europe and the US. As you can see, the orange figures on the bottom of the zero line are middle income jobs. They are declining in every country. The lower income jobs are increasing, and the upper income jobs, you think of the tech industry, the Elon Musk type jobs, those are increasing. But this is a worry, of course, and the reasons for this are largely automation, not even AI yet. This is just from computers. Many of the jobs that we used to do by hand in the middle class are now done even by computers. And of course, this will get worse as we start to see more automation. So we are in a situation now where the company and the worker are starting to merge. So there's permeability between your employer and your personal life. And we're seeing this in examples here. Airbnb gives its employees an annual stipend of $2,000 to travel and stay anywhere around the world in Airbnb listings. Twilio gives employees a Kindle plus $30 a month to purchase books, sort of, kind of part of their cultural world. And employees are receiving 6 days, this is at Salesforce, if they volunteer for a year, and if they take all of those voluntary days, they also give them a $1,000 grant. So they're encouraging their employees to do good works. And Accenture, I must admit, I didn't realize this, but Accenture gives gender reassignment in terms of covering the cost of that to its employees in order to fulfill its obligations to the LGBTQ community. So, I mean, really, that is going quite far, as you can see, into their employees' personal lives in a way that would have been probably unthinkable even 10 years ago. And you won't be able to read this necessarily at the back, but I'll just summarize this for you. This is Patagonia, the outdoor wear, sort of, mountaineering type jacket sort of company that has an extremely strong position on ecology and likes to hire people who are activists. They will actually pay for your bail if you are arrested while on an activist event. So you're, protesting against ecological issues, and as long as you've done their 2-day training course, then they'll pay for your bail to get out. So they are supporting your lifestyle choices in ways that were really quite unheard of, perhaps by previous employers. So Americans, and I think to a lesser extent Europeans, but there is a general drift towards people taking fewer holidays. Now, I can't say for sure that there's a direct link between people taking fewer holidays and people using the internet more, and there being more kind of merging of our digital lives and our work lives. But it's funny, isn't it, that both things happen at exactly the same time. So you know probably as well as I do that from 2012, that's when more than 50% of the US population had a smartphone. The iPhone, for example, came out in 2007. And the exponential rise in mental health issues for teenagers also happened in 2012. So something around 2010, 2012 fundamentally shifted in Western societies to do with the use of smartphones and continuous connectivity. And it just so happens that that also coincided with the time when we all started taking less holidays, because possibly your availability was considered to be a measure of your employability, and you needed to be on all the time in order to be considered a top employee type person. So I'm sure that this won't surprise you. Everybody's seeing these figures everywhere these days. There's a blurring of work and life. 42% of people check their email address, their emails several times during the day. Scarily, 13% do that a lot. 46% not at all, so it's not obviously across the board. But I think it would just be fun for you to access your app, and we'll do a poll here to see what the audience are up to, what you're up to. Last time you were on holiday, did you check your work emails or Slack chats or other messages from your office? Did you do it every day, a few times a day, or not at all? Let's see what you think. What are you up to when you're on holiday? Oh, so yes, every day, 47%. Oh, 49%. A few times a day. So you're obviously not typical. You're looking even more often than the average. So you're very conscientious, not really relaxing, perhaps, when you're on holiday. So that is the background. But further to that, in terms of this merging of work and life, we're of course seeing changes to computing, and computing has become far more intimate. It started off in a big room in the research department of a university. You were lucky if you even got to see one. Then, of course, it moved into work and to our desks, the desktops, and it moved into schools. You had the school computer room. Then, of course, into our homes, and then finally onto our laps, into our hands with our mobile devices, onto our wrists, and finally, and this is where we're at now, moving onto our faces. And beyond that, actually moving into our bodies. And so this is the slightly out there, but definitely likely to arrive within the next 10 years or so. Facebook is building a brain-computer interface for typing and skin hearing. And this is without invasive technology. So having something built into your brain is not what they're talking about here. Skin hearing is actually what it says. It uses technology to change your skin into an effective cochlea, so that you can hear words and recognize words without using your ears. And obviously, these are starting to be used for people with medical disability, but then, of course, they will eventually want to lead through to kind of full user interface for everybody as a new computing platform. And that's what Elon Musk has created or is working on with his Neuralink company. Essentially, he's saying, artificial intelligence is so complex that human beings won't be able to understand it without some kind of neural optimizer through a Neuralink with the technology that he's building. So essentially, as we move into the future, you won't be able to get away from the technology. It will be more and more a part of our person, and that, of course, has implications for our work-life, work-vacation type balance. And again, I'm sure it won't surprise you to see that when you're looking at very young people, sort of 16 to 24-year-olds, we now have absolute saturation, 93% of smartphone usage and constant digital accessibility. So the question, of course, has to be asked, what's next? So once everyone's got what we currently use, typically that's a tipping point to move into the next computing platform or the next interface that we all then start to become accustomed to. And according to Mark Zuckerberg, within 10 years, we will have basically this as the new computing platform. This is ergonomic eyewear, exactly the same as Ray-Ban glasses, no tethers, no batteries, and this will be full augmented reality and virtual reality on your face at all times. So you don't need a TV, you would just buy a $1 or a €1 app, and then you'd go into TV mode, but you might be in full exclusionary VR mode. So we'll see whether it's 10 years, but it's definitely coming. And this means people's behaviors will change, and the way they engage with all sorts of services, including holidays, will be very different. Already, our expectations have been changed as consumers by these companies. Of course, they're at the head, and you know them all. When you think about Wikipedia, for example, the idea of having to go to a library to get books out, to get knowledge, almost feels laughable. So everything here we get it much quicker than we used to. The complexity has gone, it's all completely seamless, and of course these businesses have set the expectations for everybody else, and actually made those expectations extremely difficult to fulfill. This is not easy stuff. So on to our second question. Thinking about this idea of seamlessness and ease and speed when you want speed, thinking about your last few vacations, which of the following most exceeded your expectations? Would it have been the airline and the booking and so on, and the actual trip itself, the hotel, or could it have been the experience or the activity or the attraction that you engaged with? Just interesting to see your experience. Quick poll. Pretty clear. It was the attractions. Very interesting. So we're going to come to some attractions, particularly through Airbnb, shortly. The airline's not doing so well, clearly, on customer experience. Hotels a little bit better. So life is becoming much more seamless and convenient, and much more overwhelming, and you're never off duty. So there's contradictions in everything that I'm talking about here. And the contradiction is between continuity on the one hand and escape on the other. So what I mean here is that in order to satisfy this 21st century vacationer, travel companies need to find a way to simultaneously offer continuity with the rest of your life and escape from the rest of your life at the same time. This is a creative tension that is the challenge for your industry and many other industries, in truth. So this is a book that I would recommend. This is a chap from Harvard and Ranjay Gulati. This is something that we like to refer to a lot because this is the heart of customer experience. I am not here to sell what I produce. I'm here to solve a set of customer problems that I want to own. So I'm going to just talk about a few examples from both retail and hospitality where this has been employed to great effect. And for us, owning the customer problem means considering the full context of the rest of their lives when we're delivering our service or product. So this is IKEA Place. And they were the best and the first to come out with the use of AR Kit for iOS 10, where you could use really photorealistic augmented reality for a super commercial purpose in this case. So you can sit at home on your phone looking in augmented reality, and you could see all 2,000 objects at scale in 3 dimensions and how it would fit inside your home. So they've understood that there is a scaling problem. People are not good at measuring, and they've not just answered one need, they've answered many needs with this fantastic innovation. So another contextual understanding of your customers' interests, desires, needs is what's been fulfilled here by Martine Jarlgaard, who is a fashion designer in the UK. And she's recognized that many of her customers really care about things like sweatshop factories or ecological impact of the fashion industry, for example. So she's used blockchain to log every single aspect of the manufacture of her fashion items. And then you can use a scan a code, an NFC code, or a QR code on the label of the item to see which sheep was shorn for this wool, and then how much the farmer got paid, and so on and so forth through the whole supply chain. So that is an understanding of the contextual desires and needs of their consumer. I'm sure you're familiar with BuzzFeed. It's the news service oriented towards the millennials, and they have hundreds of millions of people every month looking at their recipe site, which is called Tasty. And so they've thought about contextually the life and the needs of these millennials who are perhaps learning to cook for the first time, watching these short GIFs and videos on how to make these recipes. And so they've done a product design totally outside of their normal field to create an induction hob cooker that is relatively inexpensive, aimed at students who live in student accommodation, etc. And it is Bluetooth enabled, so it turns itself on, off, up, down, according to the video that you're watching live on your phone. So the cooker speaks to the phone. It basically teaches you how to cook. So this is a perfect example of understanding the contextual lifestyle needs of your customer and stretching your brand in order to solve those problems. And Neiman Marcus in America have recognized that when people are having a makeover in front of a mirror in a department store, they often have their eyes shut and they can't actually see what's being done. So why not just have a mirror which records what's happening and then sends that email to the customer afterwards with all the products recommended which are shoppable. So it's an example again of that kind of brand stretch that is now possible with all the technologies that we have at our fingertips. Now, we talk a lot about China being the future in many respects for retail anyway. Perhaps not quite so much with hospitality, but boy, are they telling us a thing or two about how you can use big data and artificial intelligence to optimize the customer experience. And this is one of the examples that they call new retail, which is total optimization of online, offline data and logistics. And Jack Ma is responsible from Alibaba for this concept. This is HEDNA Market, which is a supermarket. And basically, it does everything that you could possibly expect a store, a food store, to do. It does 6 things. So effectively, it's like Blue Apron or HelloFresh or Gusto. You can just order things through the app and they arrive for you to cook at home, or you can choose lobsters out of the tanks and they cook them for you. You come back after 10 minutes and sit down at the restaurant to eat the food you've chosen. You buy everything through the app. It's fully optimized. It knows what everyone's looking at, where they're walking, what they're buying, how they should optimize the inventory for the local population to that store. And of course, you can just order things, have them sent to your office, have them sent home. Everything is optimized for the population within a 30-minute distance of this store. So this is as good as it gets globally. Nobody is better than this right now in terms of customer service and optimization for retail. For travel, it's quite interesting when you see good examples of an understanding of creativity needing to fuse with simplicity and purpose. So this is Virgin America, their app, and typically with Virgin, we worked with them for many years in the past, selecting creative agencies for them actually, and they do really prioritize the creativity of the way they communicate, as you know. And so on the left, when you book a holiday with them, you see lots of contextual information, kind of bright colors, cartoon graphics, lots of extraneous kind of information that you might choose to peruse before your trip. But interestingly, 24 hours before go, it changes its graphic style, goes to black and white only, and this is the serious stuff. This is what you really need to know when you're on your way to the airport and it's check-in time. So it takes out all the color and all the fun and just goes straight for the serious business. And this is actually really appreciated by their customer. How many of you here have heard of the Museum of Ice Cream? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so a few people, but not that many. So this is taking American retail by storm. I have journalists from Japan contacting me about the Museum of Ice Cream and asking whether this is going to change all retail and all hospitality forever. And my answer is, possibly. It's having a little bit of an impact, yes. So what it is a cross between an experience, a museum, kind of a shop, and kind of Disney. So you pay $38 for a half hour in this space. 10,000 tickets sell out within a week of these pop-ups opening. There are about 5 of them in America, and they're open for several months at a time. And then you get to go in for half an hour, and you go into several different rooms, and each of them is themed to something to do with the senses, so smell, sight, sound, everything's pink. It's got huge cherries and unicorns and swimming pools of sprinkles. And essentially, you just take selfies in there with your friends. And then you share them on social media. And it's used to curate your personal brand online. And essentially, what we're seeing this filter through into every other retail and hospitality space is the need to have extraordinary backdrops for the taking of selfies, which are fully facilitated and highly sophisticated with perfect lighting. Pink is the color du jour, although of course that will change. And it's not just for kids, it's not just for little girls, this is for adults, millennials, and hen parties, you name it, people are queuing up to go there, and of course it naturally sells itself through viral social media. Have a look at that online. And here we see an example of some insights being applied rather cleverly for Delta. Their insight is that on dating sites, people are much more popular and get more dates if they are well-traveled. And most women in particular fancy men more often if they say that they travel a lot, because it makes them seem more sophisticated, and why not? And so if you're on Tinder, you want to show selfies of you traveling, but you may not have actually been to all these places, so Delta created a wall in Brooklyn and provided a professional photographer, and you could take your Tinder picture. I personally am a big fan of the Hilton Points slider. I do just think this is the most brilliant, simple, but fabulous example of customer service. And the simple use of technology, no one else does this that I'm aware of, makes it so easy to just pay with points, pay with money, or pay with a combination of both, and you simply use the slider on their website to see how you can combine your payment method. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Airbnb today. They do tend to come up with rather a lot of innovation, as you can imagine. We cover them all the time. And this is happening in retail, it's happening in hotels, but it's certainly happening with Airbnb. They recognize you might have up to 16 people wanting to go on holiday together. This is facilitating your split payment. So it's really understanding that context of people's lives. Perhaps the booker can't afford the whole deposit, and it holds everything for 72 hours. So Rome, very similar to Selena, but probably the upmarket version. Rome, there are only about 5 or 6 of them at the moment. They are, again, for the global digital nomad, very high-speed Wi-Fi, swimming pool, your own room, but everything else communal. You're not allowed to stay in these hotels for less than 7 nights because they want you to be part of the community. And if you're only there for 1 or 2 nights, you're not really joining in, as it were, because this is like an equivalent, mostly rented on a monthly basis, to renting an apartment, but just made much easier and facilitated for that tech global nomad. So, on to my last section. This is really about the escape bit. So we looked before at the continuity or the contextual services bit. So when we talk about escape, I don't actually mean digital detox, not that kind of escape, but really anything that's just truly immersive and takes you away from the day-to-day. So this is what the modern holiday obviously is. It's got to maintain the connectivity of or with the rest of your life, but it's also got to, contradictorily, provide escape from the boring drudgery of the day-to-day, or at least the sameness of your usual day. So taking you completely outside of the travel industry, but just to sort of get your heads in the right place, this is one of my personal favorites. China is so reinventing book selling, which in many other countries is kind of dying a death as a result of you-know-who. But this is an independent chain of bookstores, and they're all different, but they all have a certain theme. I can't pronounce it, Zhongshu's bookstore, you know probably better than I do. And they always have an ethereal entrance area. This is pure whimsy. Every one of these stores is like this. So they take you on a magical journey through at least 4 totally different spaces. And this is the sanctuary of crystal because of the glass wall. They actually do have mist in the room. So when you walk in, these are the new titles that they highly recommend, suspended on acrylic shelves, floating. And, you know, it feels incredibly magical to encounter these few books at the entry area. The next space that you walk into, in all the different stores, although they're designed completely differently, the second space is always really dark. So this is called the Cave of Fireflies, with hundreds of fiber optic lights hanging from the ceiling. So the point here is, the books are it's too dark to read. You can only pick them up and think, oh, this looks interesting. And it then facilitates your movement through into the next space. And you'll notice that it's a real journey unfolding. This is totally experiential retail into, as you can see, this fantastically colorful kind of rainbow room, the Xanadu of rainbows. And this is where you have the natural light and the comfy seating, and this is where you actually sit and peruse, and great space for kids. So that's what I mean when I talk about experiential retail. It's only true experiential retail in truth if you pay to get in, and that's the Museum of Ice Cream. But this comes quite close, and you can imagine people paying to rent this for private events. So this is another example of escape provided, in this case, digitally. So this is a DIY chain called Castorama in France, and they essentially are selling holes in walls. You know, instead of the hammer, it's the hole in the wall they're really selling you. And what they're really selling you is a beautiful house that you can afford to fix up yourself so that you can spend more time, more quality time with your family. And what's more quality than bedtime and reading stories to the kids?
Castorama, the popular French DIY store, presents Magic Wallpaper, the first wallpaper that tells stories. On the wall, dozens of characters. Each character is actually a digital marker. You scan it via a dedicated app, and the story begins. But wait, that's not all. By scanning 2 characters, you can combine them. And that's how you get hundreds of stories. Every type of combination becomes possible. Discover the adventure of the rainbow robot and the princess who didn't like dresses, or the jogging rhinoceros and the marine cat. Adventures to be read or listened to. Magic Wallpaper. Hundreds of stories to share as a family before going to sleep.
So that's DIY retailer morphing into media company. And you could imagine there being a continuous supply of new wallpapers, perhaps for new ages, with new media. Now, any company could move into that space, and that's a pretty interesting area, I think. And back to the kind of travel kind of industry, and I know this is using a VR system that's no longer available, but I'm talking about really the principle of this. This is for the Eurostar, where they wanted to encourage kids to experience the train going underneath the sea in a way that's really entertaining and takes them out of the actual day-to-day experience, which I thought was really well done. So it's one of those, use your own phone, your own device, but in this case with a cardboard VR reader. And, you know, it's a perfect example of really valuable, useful VR, as opposed to the kind which is just, oh, we've got a technology, as Steve Jobs talked about, let's see what we can do with it, which is what we do see a lot with virtual reality. So this is, I think, the perfect example of virtual reality in your industry, particularly pertinent for travel. This is Xanadu. It's considered to be a travel agency of the future, something that perhaps we're seeing less of in the West, but here it is in China. It has 10,000 visitors a month to this space, and essentially they are selling high-end travel to millennials who are on the higher income level, and they have these podiums, one's for Paris and one be for Rome and the different places you can travel to, and you can either just capture information about that location on your phone, or if you want to go deeper, you can scan a QR code and go through into the VR center. And this is one of the first places in a permanent retail space where people sit on their own with a VR headset on, with multiple other people doing the same thing, where one is immersed in a holiday in Shanghai, another is immersed in a holiday in Thailand, etc., etc. And it's obviously the absolutely perfect application of this particular technology and completely takes you away from the physical location you're in. Mr. Simon, it's just an example of how do you make, in this case, a leisure experience like going to a bar feel incredibly local, unique, not part of a chain. Most people, when polled, much prefer independent purveyors of services. It just makes them feel as though they're supporting the local economy. And it doesn't feel much more independent than this. This is a secret bar in Italy. You can only get in by booking a seat, so it's never overcrowded. You get a PIN number when you get the reservation, and you get an address. But this is not the address of the bar. It's the address of an adjacent property, which you have to go into, and you have to find the entrance, which is in a broom cupboard. You go through the broom cupboard, and then you find this secret bar. And the whole story, the fictitious story behind this, is that the bar was started by an alchemist who's traveled the world to find tinctures for alcoholic drinks that would make amazing cocktails. And so the whole sense of this is about mystery and secrecy and being in the in crowd and being part of a highly select group that get to play a part in this fictitious journey. Think how much interesting that is than a standard chain experience for hospitality or restaurants, for example. So we're seeing lots of people try new things. This is the Corinthia Hotel in London, where they've had a one-year experiment with a neuroscientist being on the staff. She's a proper MIT PhD in neuroscience and a medical psychiatrist. And she's been working, this was the year past, with both the associates in the hotel to work out how to optimize their performance with neuroscience, and they've developed a package for VIP guests, so you pay for a day's kind of neuroscience analysis and so on. It also filters through into the food that they're offering in the restaurants, you know, brain food, etc. The W Hotels has looked at the lifestyles of its key target customer and offered a tattoo parlor in certain New York-based hotels, and they're offering a series of different star tattooists who you would normally have to wait a year to have an appointment with, but they'd be available for a week at something like $500 an hour. So it's something you can't actually get access to except through this hotel. And Koti, which means home in Finnish, is an example of a communal Airbnb listing actually in Paris, and this has been created by a partnership between a Finnish designer and the Finnish Cultural Institute in Paris to bring the Finland lifestyle to French people or people traveling in France, and every single thing in the space with these multiple different kind of spaces that you can rent with communal dining and so on, everything is designed and made in Finland, so it's deeply immersive. Back to Airbnb, I'm sure you're familiar with the amazing growth of their experiences. Experience bookings have grown 2,500% in 2017. Of course, they're aimed at millennials. This is a target market that everybody wants. As of next year, they are the largest group in the US. They're spending on average $55 per experience, and 91% of all experiences get a 5-star review. So they are phenomenally successful and doing incredibly well. And of course, it's part of the Airbnb strategy, which is that they want to bring together where you go, what you do, and who you meet, because that is the nature of the perfect platform or ecosystem. It is to control everything. And they have some interesting partnerships. This is their partnership with Blue Apron, which is the home delivery of scratch cooking ingredients in America. And they've partnered, in this case, with individual experience providers who are chefs from the Airbnb system or the platform. And then for a certain period of time, you can order the particular kind of ham and chips from a particular chap in Paris, or the beef and potatoes from another chap in Milan. You get the general idea, but it brings more kind of authenticity and storytelling to each of those Blue Apron recipes. And this is Airbnb doing something, again, slightly different. In this case, in Japan, in a rural part of Japan, which has no Airbnbs, or very few. I think only 4 in this location before they started this project. So they constructed a community-owned cooperative hotel. Airbnb paid for it, but the community then owns it. And the community who work in it share the profits. And so after the first year, they had 70% occupation through Wednesday to Sunday nights when they were open. And that generated something like $25,000, which was either reinvested in the property or actually paid out as salaries to the community that work in the space. And they found that this was also supporting 70 local jobs. Now, I suspect that the commercial drive behind this is that locals start to just get used to the idea of sharing and communal living, and the idea of Airbnb being a generally good thing for them and their community. And this generated a significant number of additional private renters in this location that they previously would not have had. So that's, I think, the real purpose of this. But obviously, it does well by doing good. So to conclude, we need to resolve this tension between continuity and escape. We need to reconfigure our propositions around our audience's lives, this idea of kind of stretching to solve more problems, wanting to own their problems, thinking deeply about what that means for your customers, and it may not be the obvious, providing them with the tools to immerse themselves, whether that be through digital or analog, and in the parallel reality of the vacation. So the vacation needs to be both continuous and also immersive, and therefore able to change and cut you off from the day-to-day. And help them meet their aims beyond the obvious of relaxation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. So we know we're over time. We're cutting into the networking break, but she had such a great presentation. We want to have a few questions. So I'm just going to start out by putting you on the spot and asking you, what's your favorite hotel or hotel brand that you stay at or that you like to vacation at, and why?
I must admit, I do like the Kimptons, which I stay at whenever I can in the US. And to be honest, one of the reasons I like them so much, apart from their design's very nice and They do the wine and cheese thing at 7 o'clock. It's just so simple with the Wi-Fi. I can't remember my passwords anywhere else. If I'm part of a membership scheme and I have to remember a password, just forget it. For Kimptons, my password is my email address. That's why I love them. Simple.
If you were a hotelier, what do you think you would do to automate, or where would you kind of take AI? What would be your first thought or vision on where we could go?
Well, I do think that there's a lot to be said for self-check-in and for the concierge staff just to be pure curators of your stay and the experiences you have culturally, and that kind of integrating you into both the other guests. I think there's a lot to be said, because when you go to an Airbnb, although they're trying to incorporate you into the local culture, they don't have 60 other people who might also want to go for a run with you on a Saturday afternoon and do a group activity. I think the technology should be behind the scenes, invisible, and I don't think you should ever have to go down to a lobby ever again and say, my key's not letting me in. So if the technology could do that, then I would be very pleased.
We actually all agree as hoteliers. All right, let's go to the audience questions. The top one, the tourism industry traditionally serves affluent and rich consumers. How should our industry adapt to the demands of the poor?
Adapt and shout it to the demands of the poor. How should we adapt to the rich? Well, the rich are increasingly expectant of complete seamlessness, and that does incorporate, obviously, the need for every aspect of their interaction with you to be analyzed in terms of its data and then optimized with the use of AI. So utter and complete customization is where we're heading for luxury, obviously within the GDPR privacy requirements. But I think you can do an awful lot with unattributed data to optimize the kind of non-personalized hotel staying public. So you can do a lot with just cameras that monitor people's feet. For example, you can see a lot from people's shoes, how fast they're walking, who they're walking with, what configuration of group they're with, their gait. In fact, you can actually identify people from their gait, which is a bit of a privacy issue. But there's no answer other than it's data optimization, use of artificial intelligence for pure customization.
They cut us off. All right, everyone. Thank you, Kate, for your time.
Thank you very much.